Kunja Bihari Jaya Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivarathari Gopi Jana Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivarathari Gopi Jana Vallabha Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivarathari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivarathari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Nitya Vishnu Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajakacharya Asto Tarasata Shishi Mad His Divine Grace of High Charanada Vinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki ISKCON VBT Founder Charya save the whole world Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Nitya Vishnu Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajakacharya Asto Tarasata Shishi Mad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavindi Ki Namacharya Shri Haridas Thakur Ki Premsa Kapal Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Sadguru Bhaktivinoda Ki Sri Radha Krishna Gol Govardhana Shamakund Radha Kund Giri Govardhana Ki Braj Bhumi Shivan Dama Dama Ki Navadvip Mayapur Dama Ki Pursham Chetra Jaganpur Dama Ki Ganga Mai Ki Jamuna Mai Ki Bhakti Devi Ki Tulasi Maharani Ki Samaveta Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai Nitai Go Premanandi All glories to some glories All glories to some glories All glories to some glories All glories, Lord, feet of Shri Guru and Shri Guru All glories to Sri Prabhupada Ki Jai Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Kachich Shivam Devaka Bhoja Putriya Kachit Shivam Devaka Bhoja Putriya Kachit Shivam Devaka Bhoja Putriya Vishnu Prajaya Eva Deva Matu Vishnu Prajaya Eva Deva Matu Vishnu Prajaya Eva Deva Matu Kashit Shivam Devaka Bhoja Putriya Vishnu Prajaya Eva Deva Matu Ya Vai Svagabhena Tatara Devang Ya Vai Svagabhena Tatara Devang Ya Vai Svagabhena Tatara Devang Trai Yata Yagya Vitanam Artam Trayata Yagya Vitanam Artam Trayata Yagya Vitanam Artam Ya Vai Sagabena Dadara Devang Trayata Yagya Vitanam Artam Kashit Shivam Devaka Bhoja Putriya Vishnu Prajaya Eva Deva Matahu Ya Vaisakabena Dadara Devang Trayata Yagya Vitanam Artam Kashit Shivam Devaka Bhoja Putriya Vishnu Prajaya Eva Deva Matahu Yavai Sakapena Tatara Devang Trayata Yagya Vitanam Artam Kachit Weather Shivam, everything well. Devika Bhoja Putriya, of the daughter of the king of Devika Bhoja. Vishnu Prajaya, of she who gave birth to the personality of Godhead. Eva, like that of. Deva Matahu, of the mother of the demigods. Aditi. Ya, one who. Vai, indeed. Svagarbhena, by her own womb. Dadhara, conceived. Devam, the Supreme Lord. Trai, the Vedas. Yatha, as much as. Yagya Vitanam, of spreading the sacrifice. Artam, purpose. Translation. As the Vedas are the reservoir of sacrificial purposes, so the daughter of the king Devika Bhoja, of King Devika Bhoja, conceived the Supreme Personality of Godhead in her womb, as did the mother of the demigods. Is she, Devaki, doing well? Responsively, please. as the Vedas are the reservoir of sacrificial purposes.
As the Vedas are the reservoir of sacrificial purposes.
So the daughter of King Devika Bhoja
So the daughter of King Devika Bhoja
conceived the Supreme Personality of Godhead in her womb,
conceived the Supreme Personality of Godhead in her womb,
as did the mother of the demigods.
as did the mother of the demigods.
Is she, Devaki, doing well? A short purport. The Vedas are full of transcendental knowledge and spiritual values, and thus Devaki, the mother of Lord Krishna, conceived the Lord in her womb as the personified meaning of the Vedas. There is no difference between the Vedas and the Lord. The Vedas aim at the understanding of the Lord, and the Lord is the personified Vedas. Devaki is compared to the meaningful Vedas, and the Lord to their purpose personified. So here, the Bhagavatam is continuing to describe Vidura asking Uddhava questions. And it's kind of interesting that he's just come from Prabhaskshetra, like immediately before he was here, he was in Prabhaskshetra. Prabhaskshetra is the place where Krishna guided the Yadavas to go to perform pious activity in order to overcome the curse of a Brahmana. As you may know from this story, there was, because some of the members of the Yadu dynasty become very puffed up, basically, due to their prowess. They were very, very powerful. And some of the young boys decided to play a trick on the Brahmanas. And of course, amongst these Brahmanas was Narad Muni, who actually understood what was going on, knew what the future held. And so what they did is they took a lump of iron, and one of the boys hid it under his shirt or top cloth or whatever, and dressed himself up as a woman, and then went to the Brahmanas and asked the Brahmanas, in jest, can you please explain, or tell us what sort of a child this fair lady is going to give birth to. And then the Brahmanas, they essentially pronounced like a curse, and saying that this person will give birth to the death of the family, the destruction of the family. And immediately they were shocked, they were mortified, they realised that actually they'd committed a grave mistake here, and they went to see the elders, Ugrasena and others, and explained to them what happened. So they thought, okay, let's grind this lump of iron up into very fine filings, so it can't possibly cause any harm. And there was one small piece left that wasn't quite ground up completely small. So all those iron filings, apparently, they washed up on the shore at Prabhaskshetra and were absorbed by these reeds that were growing on the bank of the water there. And later on, those reeds were the very same reeds that the Yadus used to kill each other with. And then also that the fine arrowhead, or the small piece that was left, was fashioned into an arrowhead by a hunter called Jara. And that was the same arrow that was used to pierce or graze the foot of Lord Krishna. So we can see how the sages actually could foresee the winding up of Krishna's pastimes and how he was going to withdraw the Yadus. So what happened was after this curse had been pronounced by the Brahmanas, then Krishna, all the elders of the Yadu dynasty were very worried about this, because and Krishna was seeing all these inauspicious omens, and they had a council, and then all the elders met together, and Krishna advised them, I think you should go to Prabhaskshetra. And so they went there, and the Yadu dynasty was huge. And they actually sent all the ladies, the children, and the elders to, I can't remember the name of the other place. Krishna sent them all off to some other place where later on Arjuna went and was supposed to take them from there to Indraprastha. But he was accosted by some cowherd men along the path, where were actually, were not really cowherd men, they were some other personalities in disguise. Anyhow, so what happened is Krishna was advising him to go to Prabhaskshetra, and he actually realized that, or not realized, but he was, he finished his pastimes from Ma, and others were requesting him to return to his abode in the spiritual realm. And so his intent was to wind up his earthly pastimes. And Uddhava knew this. He understood this, what was happening. And so just before they left Dwarka, he explained to, he and Uddhava went in a secluded place, and he explained, Uddhava said, I understand you're going to wind up your earthly pastimes, so please take me with you. I don't want to be separated from you. He said, I can't bear the thought of separation. And we see this plays out in the pastime of Uddhava interacting with Vidura, and how when they first embraced, the Acharyas described in the beginning of this chapter how when they first embraced, Uddhava can't respond to Vidura because he fainted. He was just so overwhelmed with separation from Krishna. And this is one of the main reasons that Uddhava suggested to Vidura to go and speak to Maitreya Rishi, because for him to, every time he started to remember the pastimes of Krishna, he just became overwhelmed with separation, so it was too painful for him. So it kind of helps us to understand the level of advancement that, of these great personalities when we hear how they're discussing the different pastimes of Krishna, and they become overwhelmed with separation. Anyhow, so what happened at Prabhas Kshetra was then, before they went to Prabhas Kshetra, is Krishna was explaining the science of Krishna consciousness to Uddhava, and that essentially is most of the 11th canto, called the Uddhava Gita, from chapter 7 to chapter 23 from memory. And so a lot of amazing descriptions there. And there's that one section, really interesting, that starts in chapter 7, where Krishna explains the story of the Avadut Brahmana who was instructing Yadu Maharaj. He talks about the 24 different gurus that he found, the earth, the fire, the water, the wind, all these different things. How he, pigeon, Pingala, the prostitute, so many different gurus he saw, and the lesson he was learning from each of those. And then there's there's a whole chapter on actually it goes to chapter 29, sorry. There's a whole chapter on deity worship, chapter 27 on deity worship, and chapter 26 is all about purity and things like that. So a lot of very, very detailed instructions. So then after he'd finished instructing Uddhava, then he and all the Yadus went to Prabhas Kshetra. But just before he left Prabhas Kshetra, Daruka arrived with a chariot, and he wanted to take Krishna back. He said, no, this is what's going to happen. We're going to Prabhas Kshetra, we're going to wind up our pastimes. You should make sure your family, etc., leave Dwarka, because Dwarka is going to become inundated. The ocean is going to swallow up Dwarka. So he did that, and as he was talking, the chariot and all these weapons just rose up into the sky and went back to the spiritual realm. And then so they went to Prabhas Kshetra. They got intoxicated with some sort of beverage, and they started to fight, and they destroyed the whole dynasty. And then at one point, the Yadus were so intoxicated. And as I was saying, Yadus is a huge dynasty, millions and millions of people. And it's not just the Yadus, there's a whole lot of sub-dynasties, the Andikas, the Boljas, the Dasaras, all these different sub-dynasties were there. And there was millions of them, and they were fighting. At one point, they were so intoxicated, they actually turned on Krishna and Balaram. Big mistake. And, it wasn't actually a mistake, it was the arrangement of Krishna, because then what happened was Krishna and Balaram, they took up these canes and they just decimated the entire dynasty, and essentially sent them all back to Godhead. And then after that, then Krishna, he sat down to meditate, and this hunter Jara, he saw his foot from a distance, he mistook it for the head of a deer, and he shot thinking he was bagging a deer. And then it just, according to the Acharyas, the arrow actually just grazed Krishna's foot. And Jara, he came, he approached Krishna, and he was offering prayers, and he said, oh my Lord, I've committed the gravest mistake, please end my life now, kill me, etc. He actually, it was kind of interesting. As a hunter, he understood who the Supreme Personality of Godhead was. Seemed like he had some depth of realization if you read the prayers he was offering to Krishna. And then Krishna said, don't worry about it, this is all my plan. It's all by my arrangement. And he arranged that, he arranged for a celestial airplane to come down. The hunter got on the airplane, went back to the spiritual realm. And then Krishna gave up, wound up his earthly pastimes. So then literally just after that happened, Vidura came there. So he already knew about the demise of the Yoda dynasty. Yet still he's asking here about this. And it's kind of an unusual thing to be asking, because you already knew. But then, and it wasn't just out of some like social etiquette or anything like that, because he was actually feeling intense separation from Krishna and from the others. And keep in mind, he's like the brother of Dhritarashtra and Pandu, and he has very close relationships with Rohini also, is his sister, well, kind of really cousin. They call sister Vedically, but it's a cousin because he was the son of let me see, the father of Vichitravirya's brother, I think brother or cousin or something like that. Anyhow, so Rohini was the daughter of that. So there's a whole lot of relationships there, Vasudev, and Rukmini, and all these different relationships all tied in together. So he was feeling, separation from them, but mostly he was feeling, the separation from Krishna. So him inquiring from Uddhava, Prabhupada says in an earlier purport, it was a little bit queer, but actually it wasn't about social convention. It was because of the separation he was feeling. He was trying to appease his feelings. He was trying to, understand the situation a little bit better, and trying to sort of, go deeply into his feelings, the prema that was manifesting. And he felt that by discussing this with Uddhava, it may help him to feel a little bit sort of peaceful. But then we see here, actually also in the previous verse, because Mukunda Maharaj didn't really talk much about this at all, it describes Akrura. So Akrura, we can understand, is a very greatly advanced devotee, also related directly to Vidura. But Akrura, a very, very advanced devotee. There's an interesting pastime. We see that when he was sent by Kamsa as a messenger to Krishna in Vrindavan, Akrura saw this as a great opportunity. He wasn't so much worried about the message he was delivering, but he saw this as a great opportunity, because then he would go to Vrindavan, the place where Krishna performed these wonderful pastimes, and he'd get to see Krishna. And then we see, and it's described here about him rolling in the dust, and we see that when he went to Vrindavan, then he comes to the land of Braj, and as soon as he gets to the outskirts of Braj, he's got this. I remember actually years ago when I first went to Vrindavan, Ramayana Swami was describing to us how we need to enter Vrindavan in this mood of Akrura. You're going to Vrindavan, you're looking, is Krishna here and was Krishna there? You're meditating always on Krishna. And it kind of was really effective, because I remember when I got there, I was there with Subhadra and Lakshmivan, I think, the three of us went there together. And I was kind of expecting that Krishna was just going to pop out from behind a bush, It didn't happen, but that expectation. And it's really interesting, because there's a purport in this section where Srila Prabhupada describes that how devotees are in Vrindavan, that they're constantly in this mood of searching for Krishna, looking for Krishna. And Prabhupada said they never see Krishna face to face. He says, but this mood of searching for Krishna with these great devotees is the same as seeing Krishna, because they're always absorbed in this consciousness of Krishna. So when Akrura, when he went to Vrindavan, he had this expectation that he was going to see Krishna, and everything he saw reminded him of Krishna. And then when he stopped his chariot, and he got down from his chariot to pay his obeisances to the dust of Braj, he saw the footprints of Krishna on the ground, and this caused ecstatic symptoms to manifest in his heart, and then he started to roll in the dust of Braj. And so we see here, it's really interesting. It's like that there's Vidura is asking, now he's asking about the Yadus, about what's happening to the Yadus, and in a few verses' time he's going to start to ask about the Pandavas. But we don't see him asking about the Kurus. There's no discussion of the Kurus. He's not asking about Duryodhana, he's not asking about Dhritarashtra. And the Acharyas also explained that because he understood their fate, because they had sided in battle against the Pandavas and ultimately against Krishna, we understood their fate. That there could be no good outcome from this. And so also, another thing I find quite remarkable here is if we go back historically from this past time back to the point when the Pandavas and the Kauravas were growing up, and then the contests they had as young men, and then the battle crew, etc. Always we see that personalities like Duryodhana were considering themselves to be on the same level or better than the Pandavas, the Yadus, and Krishna himself. Yet we see a great personality here, Vidura, doesn't even deem it fit to even mention their names, let alone talk about their so-called qualities. So we can see that there's such a contrast of between the qualities of a person like Duryodhana, Dhritarashtra, etc., and those of these great personalities talking about. Even this verse here is talking about Devaki. So Devaki was such a wonderful personality that I think this was the third time that she, I can't remember anyhow, that in a previous birth she was Prishnigava, I think it was. I may be wrong on that. I think it was Prishni. Is that right, Ryan? She was Prishnigava, Devaki? Yeah, Prishni. The son. So she was Prishni and Sutapa. And Vishnu was born as their son. So just the fact that the Supreme Personality of Godhead manifested in her womb a number of times, it's an indication of how great a person she is. Whereas we don't see that, in sort of Duryodhana's history, for instance, or what's his name there? These other, any of the sons of Dhritarashtra, or the uncle, Gandhari's brother, Shakuni, all very inauspicious, impious people, just trying to manipulate the outcome of the situation, trying to control, trying to lord it over, and ultimately trying to kill the Pandavas, trying to usurp the Pandavas' rightful kingdom. I mean, if you look at it in terms of the context of the culture and who was eligible to become the king, because Dhritarashtra was blind, he wasn't eligible. Because he wasn't eligible, it automatically implies that his children aren't eligible. Yet he had this, ill-motivated desire or inauspicious desire that his children, he said, well, I couldn't be the king, at least my children should be the king. And the whole time we see that he was, okay, it may have manifested through Duryodhana, but actually it was him who was plotting. It was him who was plotting to usurp the throne of the Pandavas. It was him that was plotting to, steal the throne from Yudhisthira and place his sons on the throne. And so when all these various things were happening, or Duryodhana had all these desires to overthrow the Pandavas, to do, like when he was trying to capture Krishna, when they were planning the gambling match, the house of Lakh, etc., etc., etc. Dhritarashtra supported it. He could have stopped his son at any point in time. He could have stopped his son, but he chose not to. And he would say, "Oh, but what can I do? He doesn't listen to me, etc., etc." But Vidura was constantly saying to him, "But no, you must stop him." And even a verse at the beginning of this chapter, he identifies Duryodhana as an offence personified, and he said, "You must separate yourself from this personality. You have to kill him." And even when he was born, he said, that apparently when Duryodhana came out of the womb, he started to bray like a jackal. And at that time also, Vidura said, "This child will be the destruction of the dynasty. You have to immediately kill him." But out of attachment, he couldn't do it. He couldn't take this good advice. And we see all throughout the whole Leela, or the story, how Vidura is constantly trying to give Dhritarashtra advice for his welfare and for the welfare of the dynasty. But Dhritarashtra, because of his attachment to his son, because of his material desire to want to be the emperor, because obviously, an emperor in that day and age of the world would have had incredible opulence at their disposal. So he was also attached to that opulence, he was attached to the position, he was attached to sitting on the throne. He was attached to that. And he couldn't let go. Whereas we see, these great personalities that are being mentioned here, especially we see Uddhava, at the end of the 11th canto, Krishna directs Uddhava to give all this up and live the life of a sannyasi. And so he just does it. He just renounces it. He goes straight away. Same with Vidura. When he's insulted by Duryodhana, he just thinks, okay, I'm out of here. This is Krishna's plan for me. I see the will of providence here. He leaves his bow by the door. Very symbolic. It's like, I'm not going to fight for you, and I just renounce you. I renounce attachment to this dynasty. He's leaving his bow by the door. Very symbolic and quite a profound gesture. And so then he goes on pilgrimage, and he for 34 or 35 years he's on pilgrimage. And he's just visiting all the sacred places and hearing from the different rishis. And then finally he hears from Maitreya Rishi. And it's understood that because what he's hearing from Maitreya Rishi is what Krishna spoke to Uddhava. So through that, hearing that dialogue from Maitreya Rishi, it's stated there that his Krishna consciousness became perfected. And that's what's going to be described here in this third canto, is essentially Vidura's inquiry from Maitreya, which is from Uddhava, which is only a very short section because, as I was saying before, Uddhava just found himself unable to describe it because he was overwhelmed by separation. And then what happens is he goes to see Maitreya Rishi under the direction of Uddhava, and Maitreya Rishi relates to him the whole conversation. And as a result of hearing that conversation, all his misgivings are dispelled, and he has clear transcendental vision. And then he returns to Hastinapur to save Dhritarashtra. So it's a wonderful pastime, but also it helps us to see the characteristics and the qualities of these great personalities, and also helps us to see that persons like Dhritarashtra, Duryodhana, Shakuni, Dushashan, all the different brothers of Duryodhana were completely lacking in transcendental vision and in transcendental qualities, and their only endeavour was just to lord it over the material nature, essentially, to become the ruler, to become the controller. Whereas these great personalities being discussed here, and even we'll see in the next few verses with the Pandavas, their only goal in life was to serve and to please Krishna. Even though they may have done many different activities of being kings and rulers and things like that, when it came down to it, or as my good friend Shonika Rishi will often say, when push comes to shove, their real intent was just to please Krishna. And this is the actual symptom of a devotee, is that whatever they're doing in life, essentially they just want to satisfy Krishna. And in this way, because they have this intention to satisfy Krishna, then whatever they endeavour in life ultimately leads to their salvation, ultimately leads to their perfection, because the purpose of their activity is to satisfy Krishna. Okay, I don't have anything else to say. Any comments or questions? Maharaj, any comments? Yeah, speaking.
Advice. I don't know very much about Buddha.
Yeah.
Could you speak a little about his position and his relationship with Krishna and kind of his past, like where he came from?
Yeah, Uddhava was a very intimate associate of Krishna. And it's like, it's mentioned, I think it might be in the Nectar of Devotion, it talks about all the different personalities, advanced personalities, and the most spiritually advanced personality of the Yadus was considered to be Uddhava. And actually his body looked practically the same as Krishna. It was very difficult sometimes to distinguish between Uddhava and Krishna. And there's even an interesting pastime where Krishna sent Uddhava to Vrindavan to give a message to the gopis, and they, at some point, they were mistaking him for Krishna because he looked exactly the same as Krishna. And so he was a confidential associate. And actually, it mentions, I think it's in the 5th chapter of the 3rd canto, it talks about Uddhava's childhood. And he was so absorbed in thought of Krishna, he was actually playing with, it mentions dolls. Prabhupada uses the word dolls, but I see it a little bit differently from that. But he had dolls of Krishna, and he would worship those dolls. And when his mother would call him for prasad to come and eat, he was so absorbed in his worship of these dolls that he would say to his mother, I can't come, it's time for the bhog offering, I have to offer bhog to Krishna. And he wouldn't come until the offering was finished. So we can see, even in his own childhood play, if you like, that he wouldn't, he's so serious about the worship that he wouldn't allow his material necessities to distract from that worship. And we see similarities in the lives of Uddhava, Parikshit, and also Srila Prabhupada. We see Srila Prabhupada in his childhood that his father had given him and his sister Bhavatarini Radha Krishna deities. And for them it wasn't play. And so even though Srila Prabhupada, personally I feel it's just Srila Prabhupada's humility manifesting. He would talk about it, as dolls and childhood play. But then if we analyse the way that Prabhupada and Uddhava and Parikshit were worshipping these, dolls, we can see they're actually deeply absorbed in deity worship, and they didn't allow these material distractions, necessities, whatever, to interfere with their service of Krishna. And sometimes it's interesting, because I've been working on a presentation on this recently. Sometimes we see that devotees will give their children dolls, deities, whatever, to play with, and then they use the example of Prabhupada. Well, Prabhupada was given, but it's a very different thing. Srila Prabhupada was a Nityasiddha devotee. Uddhava, Parikshit, they're all Nityasiddha devotees. From birth they're perfected. And maybe our children are, but maybe they're not. And so we need to keep that in mind. It's like, we don't want to give them a wrong impression, because especially the impressions that children get at that age, basically before they become, teenagers, those impressions stick. One thing they do at the Gurukul is they teach the young children mantras. They have no understanding what the mantras mean at all, or where they're applied or anything like that. But when they're young, in this age, like from 5 to about 13, 14, 15, they just soak up things like a sponge. Anything you put before them, they absorb it. And this is why, for parents when they're raising children, they have to be very careful. Whatever the parents say, the children will repeat. They don't know what it means. Just like, I'm sure some parents, maybe not in ISKCON, but outside of ISKCON, have had the experience of, like, they might let a profanity slip, and the next thing they know, the child's using the same profanity without understanding of it, but they're using the same profanity because the children, they just absorb things. And so whatever impressions we give our children when they're in those formative years, those are the things that stick. So if they start to have dolls of Krishna, they play with Krishna like they're their friend or their plaything or whatever, when they go on the altar, that's what's going to be manifested, is that mood. So it's very, very important not to confuse the pastimes of great personalities like Uddhava, Parikshit and Prabhupada with the activities of our children.
You mentioned that in Canto 11, Krishna's talking to Uddhava about deity worship. Also, the manual that ISKCON uses, is it based on that?
It definitely references that. It's not based entirely on that, but it references that because there's only one chapter, really, it's chapter 27. In previous chapters, Krishna talks about, I mean, all these things are referenced quite clearly. In one of the previous chapters, it might be chapter 21 or 22, I don't remember the chapter, but he talks about a lot about purity and about the spotted antelopes and rivers and things, all the different kind of things that are pure and how to purify different items and things like that. But also it references, one of the main references is Madhya Lila 24, text 334. This was actually the first deity worship book in ISKCON. Prabhupada, from about verse 330 to 336, Prabhupada talks very plainly about that. Because text 334, the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is instructing Sanatana Goswami to explain the 50 items of worship. So then in Hari Bhakti Vilas, which Prabhupada quotes from the 11th Vilas, in that purport, he quotes the 64 items of worship that Sanatana Goswami explains. So that's, he quotes the 5 items, the 16 items, and the 64 items. So that's the essence of the book. And then also quoting from 7th Canto, chapter 5, 23 and 24. There's quite a few references, but one thing, because I'm engaged in rewriting it right now with a devotee in America, Jayananda Prabhu, and so one of the things where one of our focuses is before it was not as focused on Prabhupada's instructions as I think it should be. Because like the only, and I was just thinking about this before, is everything we know essentially comes from Prabhupada. So if we're going to be presenting deity worship, it's better if we present it from the perspective of what Prabhupada presented it. At least that way we know we're going to be soundly connected with the parampara, and we know that because we're following Prabhupada's instructions, we'll achieve success. But if we kind of focus it on what they're doing in other sampradayas and what they're doing in the different Puranas and this thing and that thing, it's a little bit more obscure.
Yeah, my question is in relation to the menu that is for the deities.
Yeah.
Because in the 11th Canto, Krishna clearly says to Uddhava that the food that should be offered to him should be according to the location, the season. So he doesn't say, oh, it has to be that Indian style, or accordance and food and something like that. He says according to the place and the time, the season.
Go ahead.
And I have the impression that it's very limited. Like, for example, when I joined, they used to do in France, they used to do different crepes, like even in some crepes there would be no ghee because it's not suitable, like for example, salad or something, some Italian preparation, etc. Now I have the impression that it's very limited to, and it's a little bit very Indian.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if that is according to.
Well, there's a number of things to consider there. One of the things, and we also reference this, there's an instruction, I think it's in the 4th Canto, where Narad Muni is instructing, and he says that one should worship the deity according to time, place, available conveniences and inconveniences. And then in the purport, Prabhupada elaborates that what is convenient in one country may not be convenient in another country. And he says, just like you'll see in India, there's so many facilities there, but these facilities may not be available in the West. And so that's one thing to consider. Then we see that, Prabhupada also points out there's those purports, or those verses in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, where it's describing the various types of preparations that devotees were preparing for Lord Chaitanya. Then Srila Prabhupada says there that our deity worship, our deity cooks should learn these preparations. So obviously you look at what's available locally, and here we're fortunate in a country like Australia, practically speaking, everything's available. You can get, most of these things, I mean, certain vegetables you get in India which don't have good shelf life, they're not available. But, most things are available. So there's that instruction that's there in the Uddhava Gita, but also we see that our Acharya, who's the primary person we need to follow, is interpreting the Shastra for our understanding, or presenting the Shastra for our understanding. So we need to also look at the way he presents the Shastra for us, and then and according to what's available locally. And you know, what's available locally doesn't mean, I remember one temple I was visiting a number of years ago, they were importing all sorts of exotic fruits because they're available locally, but they're paying like $25 for an avocado. That's just ridiculous. You know? So, you know, what's available locally and what is also, you know, practically affordable, and, you know, not that we just go spending huge sums of money unnecessarily.
Yeah, and also sometimes it comes to my mind that if Krishna is God, right, he would like anything from any location of the planet, not just India, because otherwise it would mean that, oh, Krishna's Indian, so he likes only Indian food.
Yeah.
Like, for example, 3 times before that 5 reports a day, is that according to the manual or the English?
No, but it's just according to the local interpretation. It's like, you know, we're not going to tell devotees, you know, what menu should be there. We just, you know, whatever they want to do locally, whatever's available locally, and however they want to cook it, you know. But Prabhupada did put an emphasis on you know, traditional types of recipes. Like when they start in Los Angeles, when they started to make local sweets, Srila Prabhupada told them they were speculating. They should make the sweets he taught them: sandesh, rasgulla, rasmalai, rabri. He told them it's a speculation. So in some places Prabhupada gave very specific instructions about things. In Melbourne he gave very specific instructions. You remember that, Maharaj? You were there, right? When he saw that, he gave very specific instructions about, you know, told Korma exactly what should be on every preparation, on every offering. How big the puri should be, how many puris there should be, how full the plate should be. So he gave very specific instructions. So as Prabhupada Anugas, we follow those instructions. And you know, definitely there is room for local interpretation, you know, things that are locally available, but also we need to include certain preparations because Prabhupada wanted that, you know. So when he set up in Melbourne, when he set up in Vrindavan, when he set up in Mayapur, he gave them very specific menus to follow. And you'll find, say for instance here in Australia, most of the temples, not so much now, but it used to be very much the case that whatever was done in Melbourne is what all the temples would follow. So, you know, that's because Prabhupada established the worship in Melbourne. So there's a history there, you know, you have to follow the history. Okay, thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki, Sarveta Bhaktivinoda ki, Jai Nitai Go Premanandi.